Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 1 of Organic Chemistry 1. Chapter 1 is going to basically be review from general chemistry. And the way that I recommend that you approach this chapter is, if there's something that you're watching and you're like, oh, this is so boring, I already know this, you might already know it, right? So you can totally just skip ahead if you see something that you're like, I know this, I don't have any questions about it. Everything we cover is really going to be the basics that we're going to use to build upon as the course moves forward. So make sure you feel good with everything here. If there's something that you don't feel good with, spend some time, watch the video, maybe go check out a Khan Academy video or something like that. And, come ask me questions, right? I'm happy to answer questions. Make an appointment with me or come to my office hours and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. But chapter 1 is really going to be review. So we're going to talk about some fundamentals of atoms and molecules, and we're going to talk about some general electron configuration things, and we're gonna try to set the stage here for organic chemistry. So I have my organic chemistry joke on the first page here, which is one atom saying to another, "I lost an electron. Are you?" And the other one says back, "Are you positive?" Ha ha ha. Because it's a dad joke. Don't worry about my jokes; they're bad, but there's a few of them in here, and I'll explain them to you as we go. All right, so what is organic chemistry? And we have a couple of things that we're going to go through on this slide. This is really sort of a brief history, right, which is really, I've only got one thing, or two things, I guess, that are organic chemistry history here. And that's in 1807, a guy named Jöns Jakob Berzelius gave names to two kinds of materials, right? And this is where the beginning of organic chemistry comes from. He called things that are derived from living organisms organic compounds. So this first blank would be organic compounds. And things that came from minerals and mineral-like compounds were called inorganic. So here's your introduction to my handwriting. It's not that great. My apologies. If there's something that you don't understand after I write it, please ask me. I will gladly elaborate. But essentially in 1807, the world got divided by JJB, Jöns Jakob Berzelius, got divided into compounds that were from living things, which were organic compounds, and then mineral sources, which were inorganic compounds. Now, in 1828, a guy named Friedrich Wöhler was the first guy to really do a synthetic reaction. He produced urea, right? And urea is sort of one of these very, very, very simple organic compounds. And he made it from, and so urea was known at the time to be a product of animals, specifically mammals, right? It's a component of urine. And he made it by heating ammonia isocyanate, which was a very inorganic material, so a compound that was inorganic. And this sort of proved that compounds weren't necessarily, atoms and molecules weren't necessarily locked from being life-giving, organic life-giving compounds or mineral source compounds that don't have life, right? You could convert back and forth between the two of them. So this was a very interesting reaction at the time. So now we sort of have a more general definition for organic compounds. Really, organic compounds are compounds, I should say, that contain carbon, right? And specifically carbon and hydrogen are the big ones. Carbon and hydrogen. So really, any compound that has both carbon and hydrogen in it can be thought of as a organic compound. There are a few odd exceptions to this. We won't worry about those. But most of the compounds that we think of as organic compounds have carbons and hydrogens in them. So carbon-containing, and carbon's the big one here. So carbon-containing compounds are really what we're talking about here. And this entire branch of chemistry is organic chemistry. And these are the compounds that really make life possible. So you see here I have a few listed things down here: proteins, enzymes, vitamins, lipids, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. These are all compounds containing carbons and hydrogens. And these are all compounds that are essential to life, right? And we are an organic-based life form, or a carbon-based life form, which means that all of the chemistry that's related to you, right, and making you run and making me run, right, these are all organic chemistry type reactions. And organic chemistry is going to be fundamental to understanding things like molecular biology and biochemistry for that reason. All of those reactions that occur and everything that happens in biology is ultimately can be boiled down to organic chemistry, right? They wouldn't think about it that way. It's not as simple as that, right? These aren't just organic chemistry reactions occurring in cells. They're very complex when you scale them up to the cellular level. But fundamentally, everything is an organic chemical reaction, and all of these chemicals are organic compounds. So a lot of the things that we like to use on a regular basis are organic compounds as well. So I've got food, medicine, clothing, and energy, right? These are all organic containing compounds. If you think about it, the food that you eat comes from animal and vegetable sources, with the exception of salt, right, being from a mineral source. Most of the food that you eat is organic. Medicine is in general carbon-based, so lots of drugs are carbon-based. There's very few that aren't carbon-based. And clothing, those come from fibers, which are from plant or animal fibers typically, or synthetic fibers, which are all carbon-based. Energy, if you want to think about gasoline, oil, petroleum products in general, those are all carbon-based energy sources, and burning those is what gives us the energy from them. So here I have my last point here is there's 16 million synthetic materials never found in nature are organic compounds. So we can expand upon these natural materials and make them into things that are not natural, but still organic compounds as well. Synthetic fabrics, plastics, right? Plastics aren't naturally occurring with, in general, synthetic rubber, right? Natural rubber is naturally occurring, but we can make synthetic rubber as well. And tons of medicines are derivatives of natural products, but not actually natural compounds themselves. But they're organic compounds because they're carbon and hydrogen based. All right, so I have a few examples of medicines here that are organic compounds. Some of these are pretty interesting. So this top compound right here, this is a penicillin derivative. So you may know these as broad-spectrum antibiotics, right? There's a ton of these penicillin derivatives useful for various different purposes. All organic-based, right? You might not recognize it yet, but this is a carbon. Here's a carbon, here's a carbon, here's a carbon, right? These are all carbons, right? Carbons and hydrogens. These are all organic-based compounds. Vitamin C, right? A vitamin, essential for you to live. A bunch of carbons, bunch of hydrogens in there. There's a carbon here. It's not drawn, but that is a carbon. Here we have codeine, right? And maybe you've heard of codeine as a pain reliever, right? A morphine-based pain reliever. Organic compound. And then Taxol. And you might not be familiar with Taxol, but Taxol is a natural product whose derivatives are used in cancer treatment. And this is, again, an organic compound, just chock full of carbons and hydrogens, right? So once again, illustrating the importance of organic chemistry in our daily life. All right, so when we talk about organic, right, you guys probably know better because you're scientists, right, and you're in college. But the general public has this idea that the word organic tends to mean things that are healthier for you, right? And that's not necessarily the case. So I have here a slide that's comparing things that are natural versus things that are man-made. And on the natural side, I've got a couple of plants: belladonna, strychnine, and aconite. I don't know how to say that one. Belladonna and strychnine, anyways, are very, very, very poisonous. These are very, very poisonous plants. They have alkaloid toxins in them that are organic compounds that are very, very, very dangerous to you, right? And over here I have a whole variety of man-made compounds. I've got a picture of a whole bunch of chemicals that are man-made that are organic as well, that are just horrible for you, right? So here, right, a couple of things that I want to point out. Just because it's natural doesn't mean that it's healthier, right? Belladonna and strychnine, these things will kill you in an instant if you ingest them. So they're not healthy at all, right? As well as all of these man-made materials over here on the right. So don't think of organic as like organic foods, right, being healthier for you or anything like that. And also don't think of things that are natural as being healthier for you per se, right? One thing that we're going to cover in this course over and over again is that structure is what determines function. It's not source, right? So we don't care whether, these three plants are from natural sources, right? The structure of the molecules, the organic molecules, is what makes them deadly. It can be the same thing that's in these guys over here. It's structure that determines whether they're deadly or not, right? Whether they're healthy for you or whether they'll kill you in the case of these examples here. But at the same time, it's not source, it's structure of the molecule. And we're going to spend some time talking about that, and we'll understand we'll talk about what that means as we move on, as we move forward. All right, so why should you study organic chemistry? You probably know these answers already. You have your own reason for being in this course. I have a few additional reasons why I think you should study organic chemistry. Your reasons are probably because my major requires it, or I've got to do this before I graduate, something like that. But there's some other good reasons why you should study organic chemistry. Number one, organic chemicals are everywhere, right? We've said this with organic chemicals being in the food you eat, the medicines you take, and all around you, right? Everything is made up of organic chemicals with the exception of rocks, right? Every living organism is made up of organic molecules, so the things that you interact with, the people you interact with, I have a dog, he's made up of organic molecules. The proteins, right, that you're going to deal with, so proteins in your hair, skin, and muscles, proteins that you eat, protein is organic material. DNA is also organic material. So if you're going to go into genetics or one of the health professions and you're going to talk about DNA frequently, DNA is an organic molecule, and understanding organic chemistry is going to be important to understanding the way DNA behaves. The food you eat and the medicines that you take, and then the materials that are all around you. The prime example of organic materials are plastic. That's not the only example, but plastic materials are organic compounds that have been transformed into very useful materials. So another reason to study organic chemistry is because organic chemistry really is the foundation of all the sciences. So I have this point here down on the bottom, which is this course will either turn you into a scientist or force you to rote memorize everything. And we hope that you won't rote memorize everything. So we hope that memorization is not the strategy to get through organic chemistry successfully. And what do I mean? I mean that organic chemistry, the way I approach it and the way that the other professors at RIT approach it is organic chemistry really, there's a logical stepwise path that you can take for solving problems in organic chemistry. And we really try to emphasize the logical solution to organic chemistry problems. And what we want you to do is to take that logical path and apply it to new problems, right, when you get to the end of the course. We don't want you to memorize everything. We want you to recognize cues that get you into the logical paths to solve problems in organic chemistry. So you can think about this kind of like a little bit like a math class. That's the way we think about it anyways. It's not so much about knowing that 2 times 2 is 4. It's knowing how to multiply 2 times 2, right? And if you can really get that foundation, you're going to feel very strong coming out of organic chemistry. You're going to see that we try to emphasize this a lot, and we have a few cues built into the PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to point them out as we get to them to try to help you recognize when we want you to use a technique as opposed to memorize something. All right, so a few keys for success here. We have some things throughout the PowerPoint slides. I've got things that are marked as retrieval cues, right? And retrieval cues are something where I want you to take note of this, and we're going to come back to it, right? So it's an important concept, and we're going to come back to it throughout the course, and take note of it, right? Remember what it is, and do your best to recall it. And then occasionally throughout the text, I'm going to come back to that retrieval cue. I'm going to say, go back to that retrieval cue where we talked about X, right? Please retrieve is where I'm saying come back to that retrieval cue. So this is please retrieve is sort of the introduction to the next concept. And then critical skills are going to be skills that we want you to learn, right? Skills that we want you to understand, to know how to do, to be able to apply to new problems. A topic that's going to require practice, right? And you'll see that these are brought up commonly in the homework, the online homework system as well. The critical skills are what the homework system is going to have you practice.